Welcome back to My Trauma is Chronic, but I'm Iconic, the place where inspiration meets transformation. In a world filled with noise and chaos, it is easy to lose sight of our true selves. We're bombarded with messages that tell us who we should be, what we should want, and how we should feel. But what if I told you that true happiness and fulfillment lies not in conforming to society's expectations, but in embracing our authentic selves? Today, we're diving deep into the heart of this concept, exploring the transformative power of mindset and emotional freedom. Join me as we embark on a quest to unlock the secrets of self discovery, resilience, and personal growth. In this episode, we're joined by an expert who has dared to challenge the status quo. Together, we'll explore practical strategies, inspiring stories, and insightful conversations designed to empower you on your journey of transformation. So, whether you're seeking clarity amidst chaos, healing in the face of adversity, or simply a sense of purpose and direction, you come to the right place. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered to live your best life. I'm excited to take this journey with you. So, grab yourself a cup of tea, get cozy, and let's get started. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what you do?
Okay, so I'm a life and mindset therapist, and essentially what that is I bring together different modalities to help support my clients. So background really, the reason I got into this was nearly 30 years ago. We had a premature daughter who was very poorly, and I didn't although I was very grateful for the way the NHS was managing her well-being, I didn't actually agree with some of what they were doing. So I was looking for alternatives. So that led me into complementary therapies. From the complementary therapies, I became more interested in energy and our mindsets and how we interpret the world around us and how that impacts on our biology. And then the more I started working, the more I realized that actually people were more interested in the way that I was living than actually discussing their treatments and their health and well-being. And so that one thing led to another, and I got qualified in coaching. And then when I realized that actually I could help people on a deeper level, I did my mindfulness-based stress reduction, and from there I did my trauma informed, and then emotional freedom technique, and then clinical hypnotherapy. So what I've actually managed to do is bring all these modalities into one therapy so that I can help people release their emotional pain on pretty much every level of their conscious and subconscious mind. And one of the key factors of that is everything that I do comes from a mindfulness-based perspective, because while I was going through this journey, I came across Buddhism, and while I'm not Buddhist as such, I love the fact that if you took responsibility for your life and you took responsibility for your thoughts, there was nothing much that you couldn't change and heal yourself from.
You have a very unique approach to therapy. Was there a defining moment or an epiphany that, inspired you to develop that approach?
I was very lucky to go and see the Dalai Lama speak a couple of times, and in one of his conversations, he was talking about how our thoughts are our gateway to the way we show up in the world. How we're thinking impacts on our relationships, on our well-being, on the way we show up in the world, how we treat other people. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but the way in which he said it was that if we took responsibility for everything that we've done in our life, that's not assigning blame and that's not assigning a value to it. But if we take responsibility for it, we go from being a victim of it to being empowered by it. And I just thought, oh, if I can give people that power, if I can show them how they can take control of their life and how they can stop being led through life or just hanging on by their coattails, that's a life changer. That's a game changer.
You spoke about different modalities. What specific modalities or techniques do you integrate into your practice of life and mindset therapy?
So as I said, I'm EMCC accredited as a senior practitioner coach. So that gives me a depth of knowledge and complexity that I can work with. I use cognitive behavior therapy. I am trauma informed, so I work a lot around trauma and how that shows up in life and relationships. My background as holistic therapy comes in for helping people to relax and manage life around what they're dealing with. I'm a mindfulness-based stress reduction therapist, so that helps me to let people or show people how they can accept and sit with emotions to help work through them. Emotional freedom technique is like emotional acupuncture, and so that helps you to release stuff that you might not actually be able to name or understand. And then also I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. So that allows me to work with your subconscious and help you to reprogram the subconscious for the outcome that you want. So really, I guess that gave me such a comprehensive toolkit to work with that it enabled me to work at such a deep level with people who were really struggling with emotional pain.
How did you like define and approach the concept of mindset in the context of therapy?
Well, I think you have to define mindset first because it gets bandied around a lot as, some obscure term. For me, mindset is just how you interpret your set of beliefs and how you see yourself in the world. And when you start to investigate that, when you start to look at how you see yourself in the world and how you show up, and where you might not be helping yourself, in fact, where you're actually putting up barriers to your success or where you're holding yourself back, that's how you can then start to change your life and your mindset. So I think that's what I mean by mindset. Approaching that to therapy, it comes back again to giving you control over what you're going through. It's a process that you need to take ownership of, and it needs to be at your time. You can't, there's no time frame for this. It has to be as and when you're ready, and different things will come up at different times during the process. But when you start to see yourself as empowered and in control of what you're seeing around you and what you're feeling and the process you're going through, it changes everything. It takes you out of victim status. It builds your confidence. It shows you how to become resilient, and that underpins any kind of emotional work that's being done. And that is probably the most powerful aspect of it.
Can you elaborate on your perspective regarding the mind-body connection in relation to emotional well-being?
So from my perspective, so I've worked in holistic therapies with energy. I've done my qualifications as a coach, and I'm also a qualified yoga teacher. So you can see how energy impacts on the body through all of those modalities. You can see where energy is stored in the body, and there's a body of thinking that everything that happens to us has an energetic imprint in the body. We store what's there, and if we don't release it, it then starts to fester. So when you're doing Reiki, for example, you'll find that a lot of people get issues around their knee joints, and that's often comes from unresolved emotional work with relatives or with people that they've not worked through that, and so it stores there and gets stuck there and causes illness. And if you work with the chakra system, which you do in energy work, you also know that as energy comes in, it needs to spin and it goes around the body to keep you healthy and well. When those chakras get blocked, that's when you get ill because you have a dis-ease of your energy system. And so everything is it. That's why it's a holistic approach, because everything is interacted with everything else. Physics has told us that we're energetic beings. In fact, we know we're energetic beings, and as is everything else around us. But we have to keep our energy high to keep well. And when we're storing negative emotions, when we're not processing pain and trauma, it literally changes our cell biology and it breaks our body down. And that's what causes us to be so ill and unwell. And so when you change your energy, you can manage your health more effectively.
How do you work with your clients to identify or understand the root cause of their negative thoughts and emotions?
So it's a process. So, I mean, for me, first of all, I have a 6 week program that we go through because we need to understand, firstly, you need to understand who you are. You need to start becoming aware of your thoughts. You need to understand the barriers and obstacles you put up, the behaviors that you display in the world. Because the more aware you become of that, you then start through cognitive behavior therapy, through self-reflection, to start seeing where you're not serving yourself. And so that's the first little inkling. For some, there's a resistance there because it's actually more comfortable to carry on in those behaviors than it is to deal with the outcomes. And that really only gets resolved when that balance changes, when it becomes more painful to carry on in the way that they're behaving than it does to stay comfortable. But so it comes through conversation. My job is to listen. My job is to watch how your body is responding to what you're saying, the language that you're using, the way you're using your breath during that, subtle little tells that you've got, because that's when you then can pick up and ask more questions, and it becomes, a more probing. Well, why do you think that? How do you believe that? Where is that thought coming from? Where are you feeling that in your body? And that then gives me more insight to be able to carry on probing until we get, it's like an onion. You have to keep peeling away the layers until you actually get to the thought that is at the basis of it that's causing the problem. And then you can start to manage that.
What role does, past traumas or experiences play in your approach to therapy, and how do you address them?
For me, so obviously I wouldn't be asking my clients to do anything that I haven't done myself. So I do a lot of self-reflection work, and to maintain my accreditation, I have to have supervision. So that involves a lot of self-reflection and working through any bias I might have, any trauma that I've experienced, and how I interpret that. Because everything that happens to us becomes a lens that we see the world through. And so you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware that you're not actually seeing a true representation of anything. You're seeing it through all the experiences that you've had, any trauma that you've experienced, the conditioning that you've had, your upbringing, the schooling that you had, the society and culture that you live in. All of that creates your worldview, and then you view everything that happens to you through that. So becoming mindful or becoming aware of how you're thinking and spending time investigating those thoughts gives you great insight into whether you're catastrophizing, or you're overgeneralizing, or whether you've got a negative mindset, or whether you're, toxically positive. Whatever it is, everything has to come down to you being mindfully aware of your thought process.
How do you cultivate self-awareness and mindfulness in your clients' daily lives?
You have to start small. Big, huge, sweeping changes don't work. They're not sustainable. They're another barrier to success. It doesn't work. I know lots of people would just like to take a magic pill and it all go away, but it doesn't work like that. You have to reprogram the brain. So you have to start small with really simple little changes or tweaks that you can make to the way people are thinking. So a lot of it comes into using, or then becoming aware of the language they use when they describe themselves. Because a lot of people will do it subconsciously, and you'll get a lot of that. Oh, I can't do that, or I'm useless at that, or I that never works out for me. And so it's highlighting those phrases that they're using and bringing them into the consciousness, and then asking them to pay attention to them and starting to reframe them. Is that true? Is that what you're actually seeing in the world? Are you useless? Does everything always go wrong for you? Because then when you take the emotive language out and you can start to replace it with factual language. So I'll give you an example. So you get a lot of people go, oh, I'm so clumsy. And then when you actually investigate that, it's like, well, are you clumsy? What happens? And they go, oh, I bump into things or I drop stuff. Well, okay, when do you bump into stuff, and when are you dropping stuff? Or when I'm in a rush, or when I'm tired. Okay, so are you in a rush and are you tired all the time? No. Okay, so it's not that you're clumsy then, is it? It's that on occasions, or when you're tired, you tend to drop stuff, or when you're in a rush, you get careless. That's not an identity that you're taking on. That's not that you're clumsy. It's like you're human. You're like the rest of us. You just get a little bit uncoordinated when life gets stressed. So it's about highlighting and giving a reframe for those thought patterns, and then building on that. But you have to start with something small, and then when you're trying to reframe that, using tools like affirmations and visualizations are really, really powerful, because the brain interprets that so successfully.
You mentioned the idea of emotions being interpreted as thoughts that are not serving individuals.
Mhm.
Well, can you elaborate on the idea? What's the difference between that and simply those thoughts just simply being feelings?
Okay, so generally speaking, an emotion happens before we have a conscious thought or a feeling. All right, it's an like a chemical automatic response kind of thing. It's what our body does in response to something it's experienced. The thought then is when we bring it into the conscious. So you have to bring it from the subconscious to the conscious. So you'll something will happen and you'll get angry. So the anger will be the emotion that you see first. But then you can't interpret that emotion until you start to use language or until you start to identify the thought behind it. So it's a case of, well, why are you angry? Well, this hasn't gone right. Well, okay, but why does that make you angry? What do you think the outcome should be? Well, I think it should be like this. Okay, well, why do you think it should be like that? Why do you think you deserve that and not what's going? And when you take it back and take it back and take it back, the reason that you're angry is because you've believed one thing and you're seeing something else in the world, and that's what's causing the disparity. And it's that that causes you the emotional pain. If you didn't have an opinion or a value around what was happening and you could just accept what was happening, you wouldn't get angry about it. So it's about noticing that emotion and then not just allowing it to go through. And absolutely never should you suppress emotions. They need to be investigated and they need to be managed in a proactive way. I mean, you can't be kicking off and destroying stuff, but you can acknowledge the fact that you're angry. But then you have to decide what you're going to do with that anger. And one of the most powerful, empowering things that you can do is ask yourself why you're angry and keep asking yourself why until you get to the crux of the matter. And then you can decide what you're going to do with that information.
What are some examples of negative thought patterns that you commonly encounter with your clients?
Probably the most common one for most people is I'm not good enough,
Mm.
that they don't deserve success, or that someone is better than them, or that they don't deserve better than they've got. I think that probably resonates with most people. Lots of other ones are that they can't do something because as a child, they maybe couldn't do it and they got told they couldn't do it, or they got told that they were clumsy or they were useless, or, whatever language they had repeated around them forms that belief. And then that then gives them the cage that they get trapped in until they investigate that and let themselves go from it. Or it'll be that whatever happened around a negative mindset or an event triggered previous responses and it just came up as a negative thought. So you might get that you're not lovable. You might get that you don't deserve stuff, that you can't do stuff, that you're not as good as anyone else, that you don't deserve to be happy, that you are less than anyone else. They're all on a theme, but it's all that negative critic that is constantly telling you that you are not as good as the next person, which is an absolute lie. But unfortunately, it is such a powerful thought, and it's a one that we reinforce all the time, and society reinforces for us that it does so much damage.
How did these negative thought patterns contribute to or exacerbate emotional distress and mental health challenges, for example?
Well, when you're repeatedly told that you're not good enough or you're not worthy or anything, your self-esteem goes down. And when you lose your self-esteem, it impacts on your confidence and your resilience. And we need confidence to be resilient. And resilience is really just having on the knowledge that we can get through something. It doesn't have to be pretty. You can be hanging on by your fingernails, but you know that you can survive something. But the people with low self-worth or low confidence don't have that skill because no one's ever shown them that they can cope. No one's given them good coping strategies. No one's given them the supportive environment to be able to do that, because the message they've taken from the environment that they've got is that they're not good enough or that they can't do something. And so it has such a huge impact. It'll impact on the jobs that you go for, on the way you run your relationships, whether you put good boundaries in, what your sense of identity is, how you live your life. the way that you bring up your children, the way that, whether you will travel, whether you will be open to new experiences. It affects absolutely every aspect of your life.
What skills or how do you help them to identify and become aware of these negative thought patterns?
But most of it is through conversation, because that's when people, when they're in a flow, they you can hear the language and you can start to pick up on that. So firstly, it's about encouraging them to become aware of the thoughts that they have, or noticing when things don't go to plan. Are they repeating a pattern? So journaling is really good for this, because you can never remember what happened. So getting it written down or recording it on your phone or whatever, so that then at a later session we can go through it and say, look, there's patterns here. This is where we can see happening. It comes from and having a conversation, because most of the way that we think about ourselves is a reflex. We've been conditioned into believing this way about ourselves. So while we're talking, it's not necessarily a conscious language pattern that we're using. It's just language that we've learned. And unless we start paying attention to that, we won't notice it ourselves. So quite often you need someone else to be listening to you, or to be aware while you're having that conversation, and just saying, look, I really notice that when you talk about yourself, you use negative language a lot, or when we're talking about stuff, you put up barriers a lot. Why don't we have a conversation about this? Why don't we investigate this? Because I think this probably will be the root of where a lot of your difficulties come, and that will be the game changer for you.
What role do cognitive distortions play in shaping individuals' perceptions and interpretations of their emotions?
I mean, like, so for people who don't know, cognitive distortions are things like overgeneralizing, catastrophizing. I can never say that word. Taking things personally, like it always happens to me, or being responsible for everything else. Have that feeling that, it's your fault it went wrong, or you should be looking after someone better, or anything like that. Kind of mind reading, when you take on the fact that because you believe something, you must assume that someone else is thinking the same way, or that, because something has happened, they must think this, when actually you've got no way of knowing. So they're all cognitive distortions, and they're all based in how you see the world, how you interpret your position in the world. So for a lot of it's because once or twice we've seen something not go to plan, and then something's happened around that that's reinforced that idea for us, and it's gone from being a one-off situation into being reinforced into a belief system. And then once that belief is integrated, that's what we do until we challenge it again. And so they can have huge impact on other people's lives. So for example, someone who always takes responsibility for everything, has probably got no boundaries, is probably exhausted because people are always putting on them and asking them to do something. They're constantly second guessing themselves. Their confidence has been knocked. They've got low self-worth, because what they're desperately trying to do is please everybody. And then that shows up as a people pleaser in everything else that they do. Or people who over generalize, or like, everything always goes wrong. This is always how it goes, blah, blah, blah. Because that's their focus, that's what they're looking for. So they're not looking for success, whereas actually they might have a really successful life, but because they've been conditioned to look for when things are going wrong, that's all they see. And that completely skews their perspective of life, and has a knock-on effect on all the things we talked about before, the relationships and their careers and life.
How do cultural and societal factors influence the development and perpetuation of negative thought patterns?
Well, in the West, particularly, we are brought up in a deficit culture. We're born into the world quite happy and excited. And, when you watch small children, everything's amazing and fantastic. And then our culture systematically knocks that out of us. And we are constantly conditioned to look for what we don't have, and then that gives us this idea that, oh, if I had this new toy, I'd be happy. If I had this new job, I'd be happy. If I had a girlfriend, I'd be happy. If I had a boyfriend, I'd be happy. If I had a baby, I'd be happy. If I had a big house, I'd be happy. Because that leads us into a consumer society. And that is, of course, what we've got. Our economy is based on consumerism, and adverts sell us the idea of having a happy life. So, whereas in the East, where culturally people are generally brought up with the idea that happiness comes from within and a simple life is better and it's more about mindfulness and spirituality. In the West, we're brought up to look for what we don't have and what we can buy to make ourselves feel better. And so that has a massive impact on us. When you're bombarded every day by adverts and social media and what you see around you and the people that you mix with and the news that you're being told, when it's constantly reinforcing what you need to be a valuable member of society and you can see that you don't have that, that's going to impact on your well-being and your mental health, and you're being put under pressure to conform.
Can you provide examples of how these negative thought patterns manifest in different aspects of individuals' lives, such as relationships, work, or self-esteem?
Well, I mean, if you just take self-esteem, so if you're in a relationship and you have quite low self-esteem and you don't feel that you deserve any better than what you've got, then you're likely to attract people who like to dominate you, or who are going to take advantage of you, or are going to they're not going to value you as the amazing person that they are, because people attract different people. And so when you're giving out an energy or a vibration that you don't deserve much, someone who's willing to take advantage of that is going to be the match that you tend to find yourself in. In work, it would be the same thing. You don't see yourself as being a valuable member of the workforce, and so you don't go for the promotions, you don't put yourself forward. But quite often you'll be the person in the background who's doing all the jobs for everyone else, that's making them look great, because you don't feel that you deserve the glory, and yet you're doing the bulk of the work. So that comes down to your confidence. Just in the way that you run your life, if you've got a very negative outlook on life, or you don't feel that you deserve more, or your confidence has been knocked, or you don't think you have good coping skills, then your life's likely to be a little bit chaotic. You might not be very good at routines or managing your money, or taking care of the environment that you're in, or dealing with stress, because when stress comes along, you need to have a good coping mechanism for that. And if you've not had that because you've had a negative experience, or because you have a very negative outlook on life, it's very easy to become overwhelmed. So it's about reframing those beliefs, or identifying them first, so that you can challenge and change them. Because to move forward from them, we need to put in confidence. We need to build self-worth. We need to have good coping skills. We need to know that we can make good decisions, because that has such a massive impact on every other area of our life.
How do childhood experiences and upbringing contribute to the formation of these negative thought patterns in adulthood?
Well, I mean, they're huge. They're absolutely huge. It's what we observe in the world around us that gives us our sense of identity and worth. So, whatever our parents' thinking was and the way they brought us up will have an impact on us. And then, the needing to fit in with our friendship group will have also changed the way that we feel about things. Any traumas or, people we lost during our childhood, that will have an impact on us. If that wasn't managed effectively, we'll have developed our own thoughts about that. And the thing is, it's not necessarily what happens to you that causes the problem. It's the thoughts that you have around it, because then they lead on to the beliefs that you take forward into life. So I think really that is huge. Absolutely, it's huge, but it's not undoable. Once we get to adulthood and we see that things aren't going the way that we want, or even better, as children, when we learn to express ourselves, and we're given positive coping strategies and opportunities to explore our feelings. Because I think still we're very much trying to control emotions, and we tell children, oh, don't get angry. Being angry is a bad thing. Being sad's a bad thing. You need to be happy. that's not true. We have all these emotions for a reason. We need to investigate and express them, but we need to learn to do them in a positive way. And the more that we can do that, the less likely experiences or negative experiences are to have on our long-term well-being.
How do you address the resistance or skepticism that clients may have towards recognizing and changing their negative thought patterns?
Well, to be quite honest, before I even work with a client, we'll have had a discussion about stuff. And if I feel that they're not ready to be making the kind of changes that I think will benefit, then we probably wouldn't work together. It would be a case of, I don't think you're in the right place for this kind of work right now. Maybe you could try something else, or maybe come back another time. When it's a learned defense mechanism, then it's about very gently and very slowly bringing that into the consciousness in whatever way. And that depends greatly on the person you're working with. You have to have that working relationship first to know what you can do. You need to take into account ethical considerations. But essentially, it's about bringing those blocks from the subconscious into the conscious so they can be explored. And then it's about giving people time to integrate that so that they can take ownership of it and then start to work through. And how they work through that then becomes a conversation that we take forward in therapy.
Can you share any success stories or people that you worked with that illustrated that transformational impact or reframing negative thoughts on emotional well-being?
I mean, loads, but one that comes up a lot is when when people have had a toxic parent, when they've had the mother figure seems to be the more impactful, but when they've not had a good relationship with their mother and they've taken on all these ideas that they're not worthy or that they're not loved or that they're not good enough, and then they've spent most of their childhood desperately trying to get that person to give them unconditional love, to build them up, to be the mother that society tells us they should be. When we start to investigate that and we start to work around all the negative beliefs, and they start to see that actually this person is just a person doing the best that they can, and that it's not that they don't love them, it's like maybe they weren't capable of showing them that love, or maybe their past experiences had caused them to be like that. And so by slowly breaking down and challenging the beliefs that they have and reframing those thoughts by taking the emotion out and making them into statements of fact, then you can decide what you want to do with them. And then you can start to see that actually it's not that you're not good enough, it's that your parent wasn't wasn't giving you what you thought you needed. And so where can you find that in your life now? And almost always that has to come from yourself. But it's about making this, and once you start to work through that, you go from this person who is carrying an awful lot of emotional pain about not being loved by a parent or not having a good relationship with a parent, and how that impacts on their self-esteem, their self-worth, their confidence and their resilience, to understanding that actually their parents' behavior had nothing to do with them and everything to do with their parents' conditioning and behavior. And so they can start to come out the other side and take control of their life and reclaim who they really are, not who they're trying to be, because they're constantly trying to get approval from everyone else. And they can start to take back their own power. And the more you work on that, the more confident they become, the more authentic they become, and the more that they can see that actually they're in control of their life. They don't have to give that power away to other people. They can find that what they need within them, and they can often come to a place where they can rekindle or have a different relationship with their parent that is much healthier, that there are boundaries in place, that there's more understanding there. And so the continual, I don't want to say abuse, but it is emotional abuse, but it can be managed and they can find peace for themselves.
You just briefly mentioned ethical considerations.
Mm.
Can you discuss any ethical considerations or potential pitfalls involved in guiding clients through the process of understanding and reframing their emotions as thoughts?
Well, there's loads of ethical considerations. So firstly, there has to be confidentiality. then there has to be acceptance, and you have to be able to, you have to know when you're out of your depth. So, as a coach or any other kind of therapist or practitioner, there may come a point where what is being discussed is out of your realm of expertise. And so it's about knowing how to close that down and keep the person safe while you recommend them or refer them to someone else. There has to be how you have to be aware of how you're going to support that person. You have to have an environment where they feel safe, and that they can trust you. You have to build that trust. You have to be, I think there's lots of ways that you can help them to express that, but at the basis of it always has to be their well-being and their safety, and that is the biggest ethical consideration that you have. So it's about knowing your own limitations. It's about understanding your biases before you help a client, and then it's about creating a safe space for them at their own pace to work on the things that they want to work on. It's not your job to fix them. It's not your job to make them deal with something they're not ready to deal with. It's about creating a really nurturing, caring, compassionate opportunity for them to express or explore what is going on with them.
How do you define emotional pain, and what are some common sources or triggers for this type of discomfort that people feel?
Well, essentially, emotional pain is any kind of negative emotion, anything that you're feeling that is uncomfortable or, unbearable is classed as emotional pain. And triggers for that will be just about anything. It can be a bit of music, it can be something that you've seen. If you've experienced violence or a crime, it can be, seeing a documentary or reporting in the newspaper, it can be social media. The point is, we don't often know what our triggers are unless we start to investigate them, and so they're buried so deeply in our subconscious, which is why we tend to repeat cycles of behavior, because we don't know what is triggering us, and we don't know why we behave in the way that we behave. And that's why it's so important to become mindful and to start paying attention to our thoughts, so that we can then start to work out what it is around us that's triggering us, and then we have a choice then as to how we move forward with it.
Can you elaborate on, your perspective regarding the relationship between emotional pain and thought patterns?
Well, the emotion that you're feeling will be based in a subconscious thought. That is your trigger. Something happens, you see it, your brain makes a connection, and then gives you a kind of subroutine to go through. So it's automatic almost. And that's just your reflex. Someone says something, you do this happens, and that's, you go around in this cycle. And the brain doesn't actually know, because it's just a massive supercomputer and it just processes information. It can't even tell us, apparently, according to experts, it can't even distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. What it does know is that its job is to keep us safe, and that it's learned patterns of behavior over time that may not necessarily be good for us, but we are still here and we are still standing. So as far as the brain's concerned, job done. Our job now as free people of free will is to investigate those behaviors that aren't working for us and see where we can start to change them, so that we have less negative emotion, or we can use our emotions as signposts, and we don't become attached to the emotional journey, and we don't let our emotions rule our life. We can move from reacting to choosing how we want to respond, and that's where we get back control over our life.
How do you guide them in recognizing and acknowledging their emotional pain without without becoming really overwhelmed by it?
Well, it's about, you have to move to acceptance, because the two of the biggest problems we have is, firstly, anything that's too painful we tend to bury, and then that just festers away. We're using so much energy at a subconscious level, our brain power at a subconscious level, trying to keep that all contained, that actually we're feeding it. And on the other hand, we're arguing with the reality of things. So it's like, it shouldn't happen, it shouldn't be like this, I shouldn't be like this, I shouldn't behave like this. When we actually move to a point of acceptance and that's not necessarily something you want to be doing on your own. For some things, obviously, it's okay, but for others, that's going to be a slow process that needs guidance. But when we can move to acceptance, so I'll give you an example. So you've got a friends says something to you, and you found that really hurtful. So your initial reaction was, "Oh, they shouldn't say that," and then you get all upset because you feel that they said something hurtful to you, or it's triggered you in some way. It's, repeated an experience from your past. And then you'll get upset and you'll go through a set of emotions, and then you'll need someone to validate that for you. So you'll go to your friend and go, "Oh my God, guess what they said? They said this to me." And your friend will go, "Oh yeah, that's terrible." And you'll go round and round in a circle doing all of this in an attempt to feel better. But what you're actually doing is just expending a lot of energy. It's like you're picking at the scab because you're not moving forward with it. You're just rehashing it and confirming the fact that actually something awful has happened. And at the end of the day, nothing's changed. Your friend still said that to you and you're still upset. Whereas what would be a more proactive way of managing it would be for your friend to say that. Obviously, you're going to have an initial reaction, but rather than just going through your default routine, it would be to stop and think, "Oh, well, I don't like that. That's not very nice. What am I going to do about it?" Because at the end of the day, that's what everything comes back to. It doesn't matter how long or how many people you go to and get their sympathy and compassion from. At the end of this day, you've still got to deal with the fact that your friend said something to you. And so it's about taking out all that emotional angst and using the brain more logically and just taking a step back and thinking, "Okay, I'm not going to allow myself to react to this. I'm going to give myself some time. I'm going to choose how I want to respond to it." And in doing that, you're taking out all that emotional suffering. I'm not saying that you become a robot. You're still going to have that initial feeling of hurt, but rather than letting that emotion lead you on your next pattern of behavior, it's about acknowledging that pattern of hurt and accepting it, and then deciding what you're going to do about it. Are you going to challenge what your friend said? Are you going to, ignore it because it's so out of character that maybe something is wrong with your friend? Are you going to use it as an opportunity to open up a conversation with them there? Are you just going to decide that, if that's how they're going to behave, you don't want them in your life? But that gives you choice rather than it just being the automatic reaction that most of us have. And instead, you're choosing to respond in a proactive and healthy way. And that's what reduces the emotional pain.
I have a question. Often, before I ask the next question that's on my mind, it sounds like it's very similar to the DVD skill stop.
Mm.
Um, but like a lot of people, when they're really, really emotional, something triggers them, they automatically respond without, thinking. So how do they, just stop to think about how they're going to react?
I mean, you can't do that without any practice. So it's small steps. So it's about becoming aware, firstly, of things that are likely to trigger you and how you becoming aware of how you respond to those triggers. Because then already you're starting to change reactions in the brain. You're starting to rewire your neural pathways. Maybe it's about having something physical, like flicking a hairband on your wrist or something when people upset you. It's about knowing your tells. It's about knowing how you respond to people. And when you're in situations, it does come down to self-control because we do have free will. So although we often get triggered, we have the choice whether we allow that to carry on unconsciously or whether we do try to stop it. Now, whether that means we need to walk away, we need to just get out of the room, we need to, I don't know, take a deep breath, count to 10. It is about not on the big things that trigger us and are really emotionally painful, but practicing them on the small things so that that becomes our learned response. And then slowly over time, we can start to replace our automatic patterns for the bigger triggers with this new learned behavior. And it takes time. Like I said to you at the beginning, there is no magic pill. You have to rewire your brain.
Can you discuss any specific techniques or exercises you utilize to help clients release emotional pain through thought reframing?
conversation is a really good one. So just having someone, no judgment, not necessarily advice, just letting you have a stream of getting everything out so that you've had a chance to express it. One of the most powerful things I think people can do is just write it all down. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct sentences. It doesn't even have to be full sentences. Just you want to literally splurge everything that is bouncing around in your head out onto a piece of paper, because then as soon as you're doing that, your brain is starting to see patterns and triggers, and so then you can start to organize it and start to get some sense of it. Another way is through creativity or spending time in nature, because that helps us to calm down and process information. It all comes down to that instant overwhelm. When something happens to us, we are instantly overwhelmed by the emotion, the thoughts, everything that's going on, feeling out of control, not knowing what to do next, and not having the confidence to know which way out of it. And so our brain just takes over, and that's where it becomes a subconscious routine. It's just a reaction. What we want to do is come up with really good coping strategies. But first of all, we have to learn how to manage the emotions that we're feeling. So I might do a thoughts, feeling, action exercise where we look at something that's happened in the past. We don't want to be dealing with the real world stuff now. We want to be looking at the past and how we responded to it, and then looking at different possibilities or outcomes that we could have had. That if we'd have thought something differently, how would that have changed our behavior, and how would that have changed the outcome? Or had we acted differently, how would that have worked? And in that way, people can then start to see that actually the initial thought that we have is because we always put ourselves at the center of everything, but that's our ego speaking. That's not necessarily truth. And actually, we might not have interpreted what was said or done to us in the way that it was intended. So it's about creating that room for possibility. And then once you've got that room for possibility, that actually the way you're seeing it might not be the absolute, then you can start to come up with different ways. And that's what then starts to shift the way the brain focuses when it goes into overwhelm.
What role does self-compassion play in the process of releasing emotional pain? And how do you foster this mindset in your clients?
Well, it's huge. I mean, at the end of the day, you are who you are, and like everybody else, you are doing the best that you can with what you've got. And once we come to understand that, rather than, it's the word should that does so much difficult, we should behave like this, we should think like this, we should be like that. No, you shouldn't. You're exactly who you're meant to be right now. All the experiences that you had in life have led you to where you are now. And, whatever you're feeling now is valid, because you know that, because that's what you're feeling. So it's about being gentle with yourself. Now, you don't have to like everything about the way that you process information, or that the way you live your life, or even about the way that you are. But you do have to find a point of acceptance, because that's the starting place. And then you can decide what you're going to work on. For most of us, we're all a work in progress, and everything that happens to us changes our perspective. It's what we do with those experiences, or how we view those experiences, that gives us the power to move on. When we fear change, and when we refuse to accept what we're seeing in front of us, that's what causes more emotional pain, because then we're battling with what is actually going on, and we're trying to control something that is out of our control with something that we can't do. And so that's going to have a terrible impact on our mental health and our well-being. And so I think it's just that. It's about learning how to start gently and slowly to find the things in you that you like, to acknowledge the things in you that you might want to change, but to accept that right now, this is the best version you've ever been. And whatever has happened in your life, however trying or sad or amazing or whatever it is, you've survived and you're here now. And what you do with the future is up to you.
Can you share examples of how shifting perspectives can facilitate that emotional release, and how you encourage clients to adopt new viewpoints?
Okay, so a lot of the reason that we've got emotional pain is because we can't handle the situation. We can't if we don't like the situation that we're in, or we don't think it should be that way. And that comes back to that acceptance again, because when we're arguing with reality, we will lose. So it's a case of, if I give you a really silly little example, so and this is not about emotional pain, this is just to highlight how you can change a mindset. So every time you go into the bathroom, someone's left a towel on the floor. Okay. And every time you go in there, that really annoys you because you're the one that has to pick it up. You have to clean up after everyone. You're sick and death of having to do all the work and blah, blah. So you've got this narrative going on in your head about how you're put upon, you have to clean up after everyone. It's not fair that they leave the towel on the floor. And so you're causing your own emotional pain because you're telling yourself this story in your head about that towel being on the floor. Okay. And you have a go at the other people. So what happens is that has a knock-on effect on everyone around you, because then you get angry, you go out and go, oh, pick up the towel. Why can't you pick up the towel? I've asked you a million times. It's not fair, blah, blah, blah. You become angry, you become upset. They then become upset and angry, and you can see that there's a knock-on effect. In reality, the only person that is upset by the towel being on the floor is you. So why don't you just pick it up and accept that you have to pick it up? Because you're going to do it anyway. You just cut out all that narrative, and instead you just accept the fact that actually the only person it's upsetting is you, and the only reason you're upset by it is because you think it shouldn't be on the floor, but the towel is on the floor. And if it bothers you that much, pick it up and get on with your life. So it's about understanding the reason behind what it is that you're feeling. So that's not to say that you clean up after everybody, but it means that you can then go and have a very calm conversation about how it makes you feel when people leave things for you to pick up, that you feel that you're put upon, or that you feel that it's your responsibility to clear up everything. And that might open up a whole new conversation about how everyone else feels. And that then there's no emotional pain there. It opens up a clearer understanding, and it allows you to release all that anger, because every time you go in there, that towel is your trigger. And you can apply that to everything else. So when you start to look at what is actually in front of you and why is it bothering you, why are you feeling this way, and what can is that what you're actually seeing in the world? Are you put upon? Is everyone making you pick up that towel? No, they're not. They're just not picking it up themselves. They're not making you do it. They're not standing over you going, you pick up that towel. You're choosing to pick it up because it annoys you. But you're just telling yourself a narrative while it's going on. So the more that you investigate that narrative, then you can start to work out, well, why do you feel it's your job to pick up that towel? Why do you feel you have to look after everybody else? Is that actually true? Is that what you're seeing in the world? Or is that what you're choosing to have, the outlook you're choosing to have on life? And then when you start to let that go, and you can then verbalize what you're feeling, and you can have these discussions, or you can work through those emotions, that emotional pain then goes. And then that changes how you interact with everyone, and it improves your relationships and your communication, and you're not so hurt and so angry.
In what way do you address the physiological manifestation of emotional pain, such as a tension or discomfort in the body?
So you can use breath work. You can use relaxation, like body scans, really good for that, just becoming aware of the tension is. Exercise like yoga or Pilates, or just going for a walk in nature. What you want to do is disengage the brain and just allow the body to reset itself. If we're not giving our body enough reset time, then it all stores in the body. And also you want to be consciously moving negative energy through your body. So maybe, like if you know that you're a bit het up, or you've had a stressful day, and you've done your shoulders and that's not having a great effect, then it's when you go for your walk, or you go, you get on your mat for your yoga, your intention for that is to let go of what's no longer serving you. And then you can just generally, your body will take that and help it move through. Essentially, it's about planning time into your day for self-care. And self-care is a term that is bandied around all the time, and it's become a bit of a, I don't know, we've just become desensitized to it. But if we're not taking care of our brain and our body, it will wear out or it will become overwhelmed and it will burn out. And then it will make us stop. So, actually, for us to have a successful, happy life and do all the things that we want to do, our well being has to become a priority. And even if that's just shutting the door for 5 minutes and going sitting somewhere and just, not having anybody talking at you and just focusing on your breath for a couple of minutes, building in little things like that throughout the day will help your body to manage when you have these huge bursts of adrenaline. And also we need to let that adrenaline get out of our system. We need to allow the body to do its thing and move it on. Otherwise, it's just going to become more and more adrenaline, and the stress hormones are not good for us. They cause cell inflammation, they cause us to be ill. So it's about managing our well-being and our time effectively, because it's all very well saying, well, you need to go for an hour's yoga class today, or you need to go and do this, that and the other. But if that's going to cause you so much stress, it's not worth it. But everyone can find 5 minutes to just shut the door and breathe for a bit.
Can you provide any insights into your philosophy regarding the role of acceptance and releasing emotional pain, and how you've helped, clients embrace their experiences without judgment?
Well, I think grief is probably one of the biggest things that we struggle with. And grief can be, apart from losing someone, it can be an ending of a relationship or redundancy or anything like that. So the first thing we actually have to do is accept that there's been an ending, because a lot of us, we don't believe that it should be like that, or that it shouldn't have happened, or anything. How we feel about it in that particular, or how we're thinking about it, is not relevant. The fact is it has happened, and so it's how are we going to deal with it. So as soon as we move from that argument into acceptance of what's happened, then already we've reduced the emotional load. Then you can start to look at what you're going to do with it. So with grief, you have to give yourself time. It's a process, and you will go through different stages. First of all, you'll be angry, and then you'll go through bargaining, and then you'll want things to be different, and then you have to finally move to a point where you can accept that this has happened and these were the good parts of it, and maybe this is an opportunity now for something else to come along, or for you to, especially hard when someone's died but they've had their time. And rather than being angry at the fact they've left, if you can concentrate on all the wonderful things that they gave you and the opportunities that you had with them, and you can be grateful for everything that they've, improved in your life or that they added to your life, and accept the fact that they're now gone, them leaving doesn't actually leave you, but you don't have the emotional pain about it. But what it does do is it opens you up for the next part, for more people to come into your life, for a deeper understanding of what you learned from that person and how you can go forward with the gift that they gave you. And so I think really it's about, that's where I mean about acceptance. When we argue about something not happening, or it shouldn't be like that, when we feel it shouldn't be like that, we cause so much conflict for ourselves, because actually it is like that. We know it's like that because it's happened. It's right in front of us. And the sooner we can move to that acceptance part, the quicker we can then start the healing process.
Whilst releasing emotional pain, or in the process of doing so, a lot of challenging emotions may arise. How do you support your clients in navigating those challenging emotions?
Well, slowly and with kindness and compassion. The emotions come up because something needs to be expressed. So when I said before, it's about creating a safe space for those emotions to be expressed, and doing it at the pace of the client. Challenge, all emotions can be challenging, but it's about giving healthy outlet to express those emotions, or finding a way to help the client manage how they're feeling and how that's making them show up. So quite often it becomes like a pressure cooker, and you can just feel it bubbling away and then it just explodes. Whereas if you've got you can show them how that you know, like, we're going to talk about this may bring up these emotions with you. If you start to feel like this, then, you know, maybe go for a walk, or maybe, you know, talk to someone, or, you know, maybe do this, maybe do that, whatever it is that you know that person likes to do and will help them to feel better, will help. But it's about giving them an outlet and a a pathway out of it, so that they can healthily express what they're feeling, and then they can start to navigate all the stuff that comes along with it.
Can you discuss any potential obstacles or resistance clients may encounter when attempting to release the emotional pain, and how you address these difficulties with them?
Fear is the biggest thing. So for some people, it's the fear of, they're so used to having this pain and feeling this way, that what who will they be without it, and what will their life look like if they don't, you know, if this is not them. And so we have to address all of those aspects around that, about what life might be like, about what we're actually be letting into life if we resolve this pain. And as I said before, it has to be when the pain is more unbearable than living with it, because quite often people won't make change until it gets to that point. You know, on an intellectual level, they can see that they need to make change, but because change is difficult, it has to get to a point where actually it's so uncomfortable, they will do the work to make the changes they need. um yeah, I think that's it, really. That's what it comes down to, and it's about having those conversations. You can't make people change. People have to change because they want to, or they want to live a different way, and that has to come out of their own realization. And that's where cognitive behavior therapy comes in. It's about a guided conversation. It's about taking them on a journey so that they can start to see or become aware of what it is that they want to change, and what the benefit of those changes will be. And you can't rush that process.
What strategies do you recommend for listeners who are interested in beginning their own journey of releasing emotional pain?
I think firstly you've got to become mindful. You've got to spend some time each day just becoming aware of your thoughts. Now, I would not recommend suddenly sitting down and doing half an hour just inside your own head. If that's not something you've done before, you definitely don't want to be doing that. It'll be overwhelming. But instead, maybe just setting a timer for a couple of minutes and just getting used to sitting with yourself and seeing what thoughts come up. And about non-judgment, we're very good at assigning a good or bad value to something, but we don't actually know. We can't see the bigger picture. So what at the time seems like the most horrendous thing might actually be the best thing that ever happened to us, because it sends us off on another whole trajectory. I mean, how many times have you heard people say they had to hit rock bottom before they were able to fulfill their potential and become whoever it was they really wanted to be? So we don't know that. So small things. Firstly, start to become aware of, you know, what doesn't work for you, what you want to change. And then for a lot of people, it comes down to who are they really? They've spent so much time being something else or trying to please other people that they've lost sight of who they are. And that's causing them conflict and emotional pain, because how they want to be and how they feel they should be are at such conflict to each other. So again, it's about taking some time to step back, working out what's really important to them, what they need to be seeing in their life, and where that's not happening, so that they can start to get rid of those clashes. Um, Strategies like maybe a meditation or a daily walk or some kind of creativity or expression can help the brain to just process information and help you to see a way through things. Asking for support, obviously. Maybe taking time to journaling is really useful. Like I said, it doesn't have to be Dear Diary and writing out lots of stuff. But when things happen for you, or when something comes up that you're struggling to deal with, sometimes writing it down, or using a spider diagram, or using, just even if it's just colors, some way of getting it out of your head out of your head, really, so that you can start to make sense of it, can help. And then you can start to just do something tiny each day to start working towards what it is you want to see. But until you are aware of what it is that you need to change, that's very difficult. So it's always going to come back to getting to know yourself and paying attention to the way that you think, the way that you speak, how you interact with people, because that's your clues as to what you can change to make things work better for you.
How do you empower clients to take proactive steps towards healing and emotional liberation outside of therapy sessions?
Well, they've got to answer to me at the next session, so that's quite a good way. All my clients have WhatsApp access to me, so depending on what we're working on, depending on the kind of personality they've got, it might be that I send a daily prompt. Have you done this today? It might be that if we're seeing each other fortnightly, that halfway through I check in and have you done and are you doing, and why not? Sometimes there does come a point where you have to hold people accountable and say, look, you're coming to me because you want to do this, you're paying me because you want a different way of living. Why are you not putting in the work? What is the barrier there that's holding you back? What can we do to help you move forward with this? So I think all of that, and also because when you're coming for therapy, you want things to change. And I think quite often, as long as the changes that you're asking people to make are obtainable and achievable, and they can start to see progress, then that's the motivation they need to carry on.
In what way do you encourage listeners to integrate self-care practices into their daily routines as a means of supporting their emotional well-being?
Well, so it comes back to priorities. So you have to look at what you already have to do each day, and then look at what are you doing to keep busy? Are you actually doing stuff in that day that doesn't need to be done, but just that you're so used to doing it that you do it all the time anyway? So it's about looking at where you can free up some space. And like I said, you don't suddenly have to start freeing up hours here and there to do stuff, although that would be lovely. But maybe it's just, you get up 5 minutes earlier, and when you get up first thing in the morning, you start a gratitude practice. It's probably one of the simplest things to start doing that has the biggest impact, because not only does it change the way you look at the world and it sets up an intention for the day, but also it starts to change your brain chemistry. So it's like the jackpot thing that you can do. And while, depending on what you're dealing with or what you're going through, it might be difficult to find anything to be grateful for, you can start with the basics. Maybe it's just the fact that, you're grateful that you woke up today, or that you had the support that you have, or that you have electricity or clean water, or that, you don't live in a war-torn area. Look for the big things if you can't, the big general things, and just start with them. And just the more you look for things to be grateful for, the more you will see. And the more that you can cultivate a gratitude practice, the easier life becomes. So starting just listing 3 things in the morning when you first wake up, or even maybe just setting an intention for the day, telling your brain that you're going to look for good stuff. So today is going to be a good day. Today I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve. Today I'm open to abundance. Whatever it is that resonates with you, you have to be able to believe it. It's no good just coming out with stuff for the sake of coming out of it. It has to be relevant to you. Or maybe it's that you get up and you take the dog for a walk on your own, and you just have some time to yourself to just think. So maybe that would be something to do. Or maybe at lunchtime you just check in with yourself and, what am I thinking about today? Are my thoughts helping me or working against me? What do I need for today? Or maybe while you're cooking the dinner, you put your favorite music on and you find a way to make that a pleasurable experience. It's about looking for little things that you can do during the day for you. We've all got to do stuff, but if we can find a way to make that stuff enjoyable, then brilliant. Maybe it's when you've got to drive to work, or whatever it is you're doing, going to pick the kids up, whatever. Maybe you put a podcast on that makes you feel good, or maybe you put some music on that you like to listen to, or maybe you just have silence in the car where no one's talking at you. Self-care is anything that makes you feel good, that you like to do, that brings you joy. It could be reading 5 pages of a book. It could be having a hot bath. It could be doing a few stretches. It could be practicing some breath work. It could be absolutely anything, as long as it makes you feel better. And so loads of little things like that you can bring into your day. And once you start to set up routines, maybe you'd like to learn to meditate, or maybe you just want to have a better start to your day. So maybe you look at where you can take the stress out of your day. If everyone's running around and you're screaming and shouting to get everybody out the door, maybe it would be looking at the routine the night before and getting lunches made and, getting clothes laid out or whatever it is. It's about all of these things are self-care, looking for ways that you can reduce the stress and overwhelm in your life, and you can find a way to live a more peaceful, calmer, positive life in however that looks for you.
How do you emphasize the importance of ongoing self-reflection and growth as individuals continuing their journey of releasing emotional pain?
Well, like I said before, it's like an onion. You deal with the first problem, and then maybe something else will come up, or you become more aware of something. And because your mindset is shifting, because you've become aware that actually, when you pay attention to your thoughts, you learn a lot about yourself, or you can see the opportunity for change. That kind of doesn't really leave you. And so maybe it's about, you read a book and you look at how you can bring that into your life, or you take up journaling, or maybe you've started meditation. Because once you start to see that you can control your life, you can change how you feel about things, you can change how you interact with people, you can change how you respond to things. You're so powerful. Why would you want to give that up? And so I think it kind of does the job itself, because once you realize what you've got, then you tend to carry on with that self-reflection. Or if not, and you slide back when something happens, it kind of jolts you back into it, and you think, oh, actually, this really worked for me last time. Maybe I'll go back to it. But you're already a different person, and so you're seeing something different, and that's where you get excited about the growth again. So I can't stress enough how important self-reflection is.
Looking back on our conversation, what's the most important takeaway or message you want our audience to remember?
You can change your life by changing your mind. I think that is it. That is it in a nutshell. When you change the way you process information and the way you respond to things, you absolutely can change every area of your life. And that's incredibly empowering.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or any final thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Life's a gift, really. And if there is no need for you to suffer during life. There are, as long as we become aware of the way we think, we learn how to control the way we respond to things, we can change everything. So when we accept and challenge and change and work through the experiences we've had so that we can learn from them, we can let them go so that our past doesn't control our future. It gives us the information we need to deal with our future. And when we have that massive mindful shift from why is this happening to me to what can I learn from this, how can I grow from it, then we can move on. And there's nothing really that can stop us, because everything then becomes an opportunity for growth. And the more opportunities we have for growth, the more confident we become, the more resilient we become, and less in life has the impact to throw us off our curve, really.
Are there any upcoming projects, events, or resources you'd like to share with the audience?
I have my coaching project, like my 6-week program that I do, and there's also an opportunity for power hours. Um, I do have a podcast that you can find on my website, but I'm not currently recording that anymore, because I found that actually the work that I'm doing in my coaching program was what I feel I'm meant to be doing and what was having the most results for people. And ultimately, that's what I want to be doing. It's helping people take control of their life and let go of the pain that's been holding them back.
Where can our listeners find you or connect with you to stay up to date with your work?
So my website is simplybe.org.uk. I put blogs out on there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn with Simply Be. And just come along and say hello. If you just want to have a chat following on from this, I do offer a half-hour discovery call. There is no obligation, and if I can't help you, maybe I can signpost you to someone who can. But I think really the first step for everybody is recognizing they want to change something, and everyone can benefit from changing something in their life. It doesn't have to be a massive trauma to work through, or it doesn't have to be a massive life-changing thing. Learning how to get to know yourself and manage the things that happen to you so they don't cause you emotional pain, or you know how to manage that pain, is life-changing, and that has a knock-on effect to everybody else in our life as well.
Finally, what is one thing that you're grateful for today?
Well, I guess speaking to you, having a chance to show people how they can take control of their life.
As we come to the end of this deeply insightful episode, I hope you feel empowered and inspired by the wisdom shared by our guest, Christine. Remember, the journey to emotional freedom is not always easy, but it's always worth it. By recognizing and reframing our thoughts, we can release ourselves from the chains of emotional pain and step into a life filled with clarity, joy, and fulfillment. I encourage you to take what you learned today and apply it to your own life. Start by observing your thoughts, questioning their validity, and replacing them with empowering beliefs that serve you the highest good. And if you find yourself struggling along the way, know that you're not alone. Seek support from loved ones, professionals like Christine, or even reach out to us here at info@mytraumaschronic.org.uk. We're here to support you every step of the way. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment this podcast, and join us next time as we continue to explore topics that empower, enlighten, and elevate the human experience. Till then, stay iconic.